So my name's Ira Kirschenbaum. I am the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Orthopedic Experience Innovation, otherwise known as Joey. We run these topic sessions for about 30 Wednesdays a year. Next year, probably a little bit more. This session gets recorded and is also placed on our YouTube channel and our Spotify podcast channel. One thing that's very good about Joey, which is quite good, we are completely open access. There's no article processing fee, and there's no charge for reprints, and there's no charge to share any of the content from Joey. So if you want to take parts of this recording and share it with your grand rounds or anything else, it'll be right on the YouTube channel. So right tonight, we are going to be discussing OR efficiency, specifically related to product advances and very specifically featuring a very, I will call it unique, but some people like Sarah Ronk will call it common product, a uniquely common product that is a game changer in the OR. And it is the Turbett surgical system. And we will delve into not only the system, but also the concept of OR efficiency and all the things that happen outside of the skin and tissue that make a big difference in the OR. We have our faculty here tonight, and I will have them introduce themselves. We'll start with Brian McGrath, who is right now vacationing and joining us from vacation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ira. I'm Brian McGrath. I'm an orthopedic surgeon in Buffalo, New York. I've been there for 30 years. Maybe I'm the second best joint surgeon in New York State, or third after Ira and Andy and whoever else may be in New York State. Maybe I'm fifth or sixth. But I've been doing it for a long time. I'm a professor in the Jacobs School of Medicine. And I think, Rob, I'm the original investor in Turbett back in 2013, other than Rick, who really wasn't an investor at that point. So I am definitely conflicted, so everybody can know that. I have vested interest in this all going well, and I'll do my best not to bore you.
Oh, well, I think there's a difference between conflicted and dedicated and a believer. So, it's great. Sarah Ronk, like you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Ronk. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I work in a surgical hospital here in Sioux Falls. I have 20 pods in my facility. Absolutely love them. I am an SPD supervisor. I have been in SPD for 20 years, so I have a lot of experience with this and can give you some firsthand knowledge on how the pods have changed my life and the processes within my hospital.
That's great. I'd like Moby Parsons to introduce himself. Moby?
Hi, I'm 20 years in practice in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I've been in New Hampshire for all of my career. I predominantly do hip, knee, and shoulder replacement, and we were kind of early pioneers in the transition to outpatient arthroplasty in our region. And we have, I think, 6 Turbett pods at our ASC, so we're very familiar with this product and how it helps run flip rooms. And I have been saying for years that I want to actually come out and visit Wickline because his ASC is more efficient than mine, but that has nothing to do with Turbett surgical pods. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Andy Wickline from upstate New York, from New York.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Wickline. I practice in Utica, New York. I've been there 22 years. My focus really is understanding the entire patient episode of care from 6 weeks pre-op. I used to say until 12 weeks, but now we're really trying to push to 6 months. And my goal is to understand efficiency. We're 30,000 surgeons. I'm number 11 for lowest cost nationwide. So I look at all of these things. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I use the Turbett system. I have no invested money in it. I just use it because it works for me.
All right. This is great. Now, I want to also tell everybody, if you have questions, the best thing to do is to please put your questions in the chat, and then I will call on you and ask you. You don't have to answer. This way, you to show your video screen and ask your question. This is an open mic session. This is not just a webinar. So feel free to pound the questions into the chat room. I'm going to lead off with the following question. We really want to understand what are the range of issues related to OR efficiency that are not controlled by the surgeon. You know, the surgeon thinks they control every aspect of OR efficiency. But I'm going to start with you, Sarah. What's really the range of issues related to
So there's a lot of issues that can come up with like OR efficiency. You have staffing can be a problem. You also have your turnover times in between cases. When you're opening for your cases, you can come across sterilization issues, holes in wrappers, not having backup. What are we going to do? Um, from a surgeon side, they don't ever get to see the background of everything that's going on. And so the thing about the pod system for me is that it took that hole in the wrapper scenario completely out of the picture. We no longer have that issue. And so we've actually been able to increase the productivity throughout our workday because we do not run 24/7. We're a specialty hospital. We close down at a certain hour. We stop surgeries at a certain hour. And we want to be able to take patient care to the highest quality that we can possibly provide. And the system has been able to do that. And it's made it way more efficient. My CSPD individuals are able to sterilize and process instrumentation a lot quicker than wrapping them, putting them on a cart and moving them 500 times between.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
Sorry, I
Brian,
muted.
yeah, I got it. Yeah,
Accidentally
you
muted.
all right, Brian, tell us a little bit about some OR efficiency issues that either this product addresses or that are escaping a lot of surgeons. Because, you
Yeah.
know, I'll preface this. We had Charlie DeCook on a number of times, and one of the things he talks about is forget about OR utilization. We need to talk about throughput. How many joints can you get done by a certain time of the day? Or how many rotator cuffs can you get done by a certain time of day? How many shoulder arthroplasties can you get done by a certain time of day? Throughput. You know, if your goal is 8 by 5, let it be 8 by 5. That's fine. But how do you get there? What's the mechanisms behind that sort of trip you up a bit?
Yeah, well, remember, efficiency is the ability to achieve your goal with little to no wasted energy or effort. You know, you want to work smarter, you don't need to work harder. Then you got to go back to the 1930s. You have quotes like that by, you know, uh, engineers that were looking to make the assembly line even better than it was and teaching people. But what are your goals, right? I mean, are your goals can't just be limited to how fast you can do surgeries. I mean, doing surgeries fast is important. Getting people through the OR, like Charlie talks about, is very important. But you really want to waste less time, right? And you want to be able to enjoy your life, but you'd want to make as much money or more than you did with whatever previous system that you were using. So if you look back, just like, I mean, all you guys who've been in here for 20 years or more, you can remember really the epiphany of when joint surgeons were told they actually were making a lot of money for the hospital. In the past, it was you were nothing. You were no more important than, you know, the people doing hernias or all these other kind of things. But the reality is with BPCI, the bundled, you know, patient care initiative back in the early teens, you know, showed surgeons that they were making a lot more money for the hospital than anybody ever told them before. So that kind of got everybody started, you know, around how to do things better. So what we ended up doing, and Andy knows this, we've talked about it a number of times, is we formed an IPA throughout Western New York, and we have 20 high volume surgeons, you know, within the organization, and we now control about $180 million worth of perioperative spend through 5 hospitals and 5 ASCs. And we decided to make our healthcare, an ecosystem. And so back in 2017, we're like, okay, what else can we do here? We took all kinds of, money out of waste before and after and said, okay, well, we brought Turbett pods in 2017. So we've been using them for 7 years. We went from 4 to 16 in our hospital. And now we have it in every single one of the hospitals throughout our region. And when you look at it, we look at the data, I looked at the data before coming here, we saved 3,100 hours a year. That's equivalent to the 3.5 weeks of full-time equivalents for an entire surgical team. So if you just use the math on it, it's 1 surgeon, 1 nurse, 1 tech for an entire year of hours of savings that we can put back into the equation. We also have a hospital initiative to go green. So we saved over 10,000 cubic feet of medical waste during that same period of time. But when you look back at it and say, well, our surgeons are, they're working things efficiently, they're getting out of the hospital, are they making more money? And the answer is, yeah, our surgeons are making 2.5, and Andy can back me up on this, 2.5 more times than they did in 2017. And they're home at the same time or earlier because of the use of the pods throughout all our systems. Our SPD people are much happier. With our 10,000 cases, they lift almost a little bit under 1 million pounds less a year. And Sarah, that's true with your people up in South Dakota. Yeah, and then our hospitals have got 10% growth because essentially we now have a free surgeon, free OR, free entire surgical team. So they're up 10% a year. And since the insurance companies are somewhat our partners in this as well, they have a negative 7.5% against their trend. So they're happy with this as well. All this rolls around to being an efficient healthcare delivery system where Turbett fits perfectly into this because it saves us a lot of that wasted time that Sarah was talking about before, with things that either have holes in them or wet loads or all these things that are missing. So it's been a great product for us.
Okay, Moby, let's talk about the you using in the ASC.
Yeah.
I want to ask for a question. When you brought it in, when people brought it in, was it from the beginning at the ASC or later in the ASC? And what was the discussion around bringing it in? Any barriers? Any pushback? I mean, it's always interesting when a new technology comes out. How does it get adopted?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, we brought it in a little bit later, and this was kind of before joints transitioned to the ASC. So our ASC has been around for 10 or 15 years and started off, it's a multi-specialty. There's GI, there's ophthalmology, plastic surgery, ENT, orthopedics, et cetera. And so when we first started doing orthopedics there, it was predominantly sports medicine type of cases, and then eventually joints transitioned over. And, when these things are built, with simpler cases in mind, the SPD side of it isn't necessarily ready to handle the volume of trays that can come in with arthroplasty cases, particularly if you're, trying to run a flip room, which I think is critical to efficiency in arthroplasty. And so you really need to figure out, if you don't want to completely revamp your SPD, because that's expensive and time consuming, you need to figure out how you can really maximize the efficiency on that side. And so for us, we brought it in when we built a second room, opened up the possibility of running a flip room at our ASC. And then it just became absolutely critical from the standpoint of being able to process all those instruments so that you can do, 6+ cases a day and, have the backups that you need and sort of free up your staff to make sure that your patients are getting in the room in a timely fashion. So I think all of the efficiencies, it's not just the sterilization side. I mean, that's a big part of it, but I think it's also the fact that a single tech can open up these cases. So as you know, in a hospital setting, you have to have the nurse basically unwrapping the blue wrap, checking for holes and all that kind of thing in a standard operating theater. And so it really takes 2 people, and that nurse can't go expedite getting the patient in the room until the room is completely open. That's how it works in my hospital. And so that alone reduces some of the efficiency. Whereas with the Turbett pods, you don't really need that second person to get the case open. That person can be, helping get that patient prepped and ready to come in. So I think that's really a critical side of it, is just freeing up hands to do other work. So you can basically get the same job done with one person instead of two. And I think that's really critical, particularly, we're all, as reimbursements go down, we're all trying to maximize the throughput. And, given the number of trays that you need for some of these cases, you've just got to have an efficient SPD side of things. And so when we opened up the second room, we didn't necessarily, completely retool the sterilization side of things. So we just needed a method to be able to maximize the efficiency without building out a lot more infrastructure on that side. And Turbett really helped us do that.
Awesome. We have a question from Masha Demanis. Masha, who does MSK Mondays on LinkedIn, and many people know her expertise in the MSK space. Masha, you have a question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate hearing sort of the impact. I personally, this is my first time really getting familiar with the Turbett system, so love hearing about it. But could one of you talk a little bit about sort of operationally for the techs, for the physicians? How is the system different from today's process? So, in terms of the whole case, like, does it just go into this pod? What operationally has to be different, and what improves the efficiency other than just taking off the wrapping? And if relevant, how is it different than other emerging products in the market? I won't name names. Really appreciate
Ira, hey, Ira,
Yeah.
Can I do something unbiased, since those people are biased for a minute, to comment?
Yep. Well, they're not all biased, they're biased because they either bought it or.
Right, that's bias, and I love Rob.
Okay.
So, Masha, when you walk into an operating room and a surgeon, you rely on the basement, these human beings that you've never met that are supposed to bring you these sterile trays, that 10% to 15%, you have only that one tray, and there's a hole in the tray. And suddenly now your case is delayed 4 hours because they have to re-sterilize it. And you have to use this archaic system that people don't want to spend money and then rip off the surgeons because they're not being paid. And so now you sit there waiting for your case to start. Rob Turbett figured out, walk into the room with a machine that has all the trays in there, open the door and let the person put it out on your field, and now it's sterile. Why are we wrapping things, period? Those people shouldn't have a job. And so the point is that suddenly now you're coming into the 21st century. And so, in all sincerity, whether there are competitors or not, the idea is everything in healthcare has to improve. I'm happy people want to be efficient. I don't want to rely on another human being. I just don't. Because I don't like middle people to buy anything. And so the point is, we are dealing with something that's not only efficient, but it's novel, that it gets rid of human error. And as a surgeon, I don't want human error, and God forbid I have human error if we can limit it. So that's my 2 cents, Ira.
Oh,
I appreciate that, Dr. Plancher. So yeah, I mean, obviously in principle, know the problem, but I guess I just want to understand, all of the products go into the pod and then sterilized in the pod and not opened until in the OR. Am I understanding the principle correctly?
So we finish a case, the stuff goes from my OR tech to Central Sterile, my ASC. They get the bioburden off, they scrub it down, goes in the washer, 35 minutes. It now goes uncovered into the turbot pod. It then is cooked at 270 degrees, give or take. I think that's the number, for 60 minutes, then has a 30-minute cool down time. And you have a little filter on the front. And that pod's good for 30 days. And it's much harder to create a sterility issue with that pod, and it gets wheeled right in the room. The circulating nurse does need to pop the top off or the side off because that's not sterile on the outside, and then the circulating nurse can go get the patient while the tech is pulling the stuff out. And so that's really the key factor. So you're looking at about just over 2 hours of from going out of the room to being clean and ready to be used again.
Masha, if you look at Rob Turbett and then you look at Butch Ruby, you will see the pod close with the filter, and then you'll see the pod, isn't it? In between is, the sterilization process, then the autoclave, then up in the room. Then that blue filter with the front door comes off. Then the tech then can grab all the sterile trays and put it right away on their setup, which takes about 2 to 2.5 minutes, depending on how many trays are in there, versus 15 to 20 minutes of 2 people opening up all those trays and checking for twilight through blue wrap, which is almost archaic, Kevin, when you think about that. The size of the hole. I mean, I think people wore enough masks for a couple of years there to realize that bacteria and viruses go through really tiny, tiny holes that you can't see. But that's the essence of it. I mean, I think Rob sent Iris, some slides to show it in more detail. If you'd like to see it in more detail, I'm sure we could do that. But that's the essence of the process, and the speed of it is the same thing as Andrew said before about once everything is actually washed, cleaned, and then placed into the pod, then the single sealed door, then that whole thing goes into the autoclave. So that whole setup is now ready for the operating room, either that later that day or the next day. And that was one thing that I think is great in ASCs, Moby, is that at the end of the day, if your people can keep up with your flow, most of your stuff is already clean and sterilized before you leave that day. And in the past, it would take them almost 4 hours to sterilize all of our stuff on our ASC, which meant that if you're doing 6 cases the next day, you need 24 hours of time just to sterilize them all. And I don't know any ASCs other than the one I just built that have 3, medium-sized autoclaves that can handle that kind of load. So it is very helpful, I think, in our ASC to try and get everything turned over for my partners the next day.
I have a quick question off of Masha's question. It is each case, and this thing sounds just foolish, but is each case one pod? Like it's a pod per case, right?
Yes, normally, yeah.
And there are different size pods, you may not. What if you have a four tray case?
You don't?
I do. I will actually have a 4-tray case because right now I'm not utilizing the pods to their full potential. I'm currently trying to upgrade my instrumentation in order to be able to put the entire procedure within the pod. But utilizing that, even with just 4 pans, has just minimized the trouble that comes with wrapping and the time that it takes. The efficiency alone is just, it's mind-boggling to me that people aren't just coming at you going, I really want to give this a shot.
Well,
For an SPD individual, the thing about it is, and I'm just going to try and backtrack a little bit here and to answer a little bit more, your entire case will go into a pod normally. Yes, correct? Yeah. Everybody's doing this. You take your total pans, your normal everyday use, like big ortho instruments, needle holders and everything else, that all goes in there. And instead of taking the time to check every single wrapper on every single one of those trays, you check one filter and that's it. The nurse leaves the room, goes get the patient while the tech is setting up out of that pod. It's so efficient, it's not even funny.
Other comments on that issue?
Yeah, so I think, a critical element of that, and Charlie DeCook could probably speak to this, is running things in series versus parallel, So if you have to wait for a scrub nurse to open every single tray, your case is not starting until that room is like 100% set up and ready to go, and only then does the nurse leave the room, go over to the preoperative holding area and start that process of verifying who the patient is and going through their little checklist of things they have to do, and so that alone is, 10 minutes right there. And so I think particularly if you're running flip rooms, knowing when to call, and also just little steps like, I mean, what happens in my case is we'll get to a certain point in the case and the scrub tech will say, okay, look, can we clear the instruments? And if we're done putting implants in, they'll get that stuff out of the room right then and there. And if it takes, 15, 20 minutes to close a total knee, the instruments don't have to be in there to the end of the case. They can take those instruments out early and get the washing process done and get them into the pods and get them going. And so I think that there's just multiple, areas along the whole sort of surgical process from the time the patient is sort of getting prepped and getting the spinal put in, et cetera, all the way through to when you're closing the case, where these things, just freeing up hands and thinking about workflow, you can maximize the efficiency.
Awesome. We have a question, a lot of questions going on, so I'm going to pick and choose. Vincent Palmer, if you're still there, you want to show us your video, show us yourself, and ask your question. Oh, he wanted a question about quantifying in dollars, and I think wrapping 8 trays versus potting those 8 trays, just on a single case,
Yep. My question was, what was the labor cost versus wrapping 8 trays versus potting 8 trays?
Okay.
Sarah, because usually we get a pushback as a vendor or a rep of bringing in too many trays. So can you quantify what it costs to wrap 1 tray or 8 trays versus potting 8 trays?
So I can't, there's a lot that goes into trying to figure out like whether like dollars and cents here, because you're talking about wrappers, liners, feet, man hours, sterilization time, washer time, all, there's so much into it. But you need to take a look at it in this term. It would normally take a CSR technician to wrap 8 trays, approximately an average of 30 minutes. Let's just take all the wrappers and everything out of it. And you have to take like what you're paying them to do that. So if you have 2 back-to-back cases that require 8 pans, 30 minutes, that's an hour of their day. I can take those 8 trays and put them in a pod in approximately 3 to 5 minutes. So just then right there, I'm saving dollars and cents because I'm able to utilize that CSPD tech to do other things other than just stand there and wrap 8 trays for 30 minutes.
Right. A quick question. What happens when you open in the room and the case gets canceled before incision? Do you just put them right back in? Do you have to do something with those instruments by law? I mean, Sarah, what happens?
Yeah, by law, well, it depends on whether or not there, is a patient in the room. If the patient's made it to the room, you have to rewash all the instruments that were in there because they're contaminated. If there's not a patient in the room and we cancel the case and the door's just been popped, they're able to just bring it back downstairs. We're able to just reprocess it from there.
Okay, it's very good. There was a very important question from Dan Schlatter, but I'm going to save Dan for about 10 minutes because I know it's a favorite topic of Kevin Plancher's as well. So that's going to be a fascinating topic in 10 minutes. But Dan, I will call on you. So hold it. Dan is one of the senior editors at Joey, and I thank you for all that work, Dan. But I'm going to call on you in about 10 minutes. I want to know a question. Why is there a barrier at all to get this? What are the barriers to get this technology or similar technology as Marshall brought out? There are other technologies coming out possibly, but the reality is, what do you think are the barriers to to, let's say, my OR, which is, we have a lot of ORs, but we have general surgery, ophthalmology, everybody, getting everybody in the same room. So, what do we think are the barriers? Andrew, are you on?
I'm back. I had an internet issue, sorry. I think the biggest barrier is, well, we've always done it this way, and there's going to be some potential capital, outlay in the beginning, and is it going to make a difference? And how, who have to train people? There's this
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit there, Andrew.
barrier.
All right,
I think the biggest barrier is resistance to change. So,
okay. Moby, what do you think of some of the big barriers?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think there's always, I think as Sarah mentioned, it's really hard to kind of quantify the benefit of these things in terms of dollars and cents because there's so many facets. When you look at these like TDABC models and how people, quantify efficiency, that stuff is sort of way above my pay grade. But I think if you were to do a real TDABC type of analysis on this and look at, workflow and time spent by various different staff members doing different activities and the cost of blue wrapping and the cost of this, that, and the other thing, particularly as the cases get more complicated. I think it's one of these things where, yes, there's a little bit of leap of faith that it pays for itself in terms of efficiencies. There's a little bit of an upfront capital cost. And sometimes people who are on the dollars and cents side, they want really hard and fast numbers that can be hard to provide for something like this. But if you talk to the people in SPD, I talked to one of our, and the other thing you have to realize is that in an ASC setting, people multitask. I can tell you that in my ASC, people that second scrub our cases, people that are the primary scrub, they're also carting instruments out of the room, getting instruments over to CSR, helping do some of the washing to keep the efficiency going. So, people really are working sort of beyond one specific job title, particularly in a busy ASC setting, to keep the flow going. And if you talk to them and just say, from the standpoint of your day-to-day operations in a busy ASC, trying to pump a lot of cases through and making sure that, things are ready to go on time and efficiently, they're like effusive about this product, and they'll tell you, yeah, it takes up space, and yeah, there's a cost to the filters and things like that, but it is just game changing in terms of getting these cases done. And so, I think one of the barriers may be that the people that are writing the checks, they may want really hard and fast numbers to sort of prove the value of this. But, if you talk to the people who are actually boots on the ground doing the work, they can't say enough about how good it is.
All right. We have a question from Mihir Patel, and then we're going to go on to Dan Schlatter's question, which is very interesting. Mihir, you want to show us your video and ask your question?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ira. For those with the Turbett system, with obviously the labor shortage nationwide, did you guys just add more pods going forward as SPD became much more expensive to have? I think that would help our CFOs to understand the value here.
Amir, I can tell you one thing, that when we went through a crisis in our hospital back in 2018, the director of SPD was not in favor of putting pods in there because it represented change. Everybody's been around here long enough, like Ira and I, it took almost 10 years to go from people wrapping trays with linen to blue wrap. And it literally took that long to make that change 35 years ago, and now it's obviously the great change to change from wrapping to actually not wrapping and putting things into an autoclave. But our hospital went through a crisis in the summer where we lost a whole bunch of people in SPD. And the woman who was in charge of SPD came up to me in the late fall and said, "My God, I'm so glad we had the pods. We would have never made it through the summer without them." And then we doubled the number of pods in the hospital that next year, and have not looked back. Super helpful in that in the people side of our industry, relative to people not getting hurt because they don't lift as much either, because they only lift it once, put it in the pod, as opposed to lifting, wrapping, putting on in the sterilizer, out of the sterilizer, upstairs. So we have fewer people getting injured in SPD as well, or taking, time on SPD for injuries. So it's very helpful when it comes to people in my hospital.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the efficiency actually is in just opening and just having one person take care of it. You don't need the nurse and the tech, right? And so that's huge, because then you can run 6 rooms at a time with 3 people versus basically 12 people in both of the rooms, in all the rooms. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Dan, are you around? Dan Schlatter, you want to video yourself or video yourself and ask your question? It's a kind of a very interesting one that always touches on efficiency in the OR. Dan, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here, Ira. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very
I
well.
can hear you, Dan. Be nice, Dan. You were a resident in Buffalo.
I was, and it's great to see you, Brian.
Hi, Dan.
So my question was, if everyone didn't see it or read it, is that the RUC, which is the RVU Update Committee, which is run by the AMA and about 6 to 8 physicians, and I don't know how often, but they look at our efficiency and look to see what our reimbursement should be. If we start doing more cases per day, is that going to affect our reimbursement? I mean, in theory, it will. So how do we combat that is my question. I mean, I want to be more efficient, and I love everything that I'm hearing. But I don't know. Kevin, you know a lot more about this than I do, I'm sure. But you probably heard this question.
I'm waiting for Brian. I only gave the model for those on. The ophthalmologist years ago said we can do a cataract in 2 minutes. So let me put 30 on my schedule. And insurance said, no sweat. We'll now give you $65. So now I have to put 40 cataracts. I don't want to see any efficiency in an operating room. I want to live there and get paid more. I want to do 2 cases and get paid $30,000 per case. So anyone that wants volume, your epitaph is he was a good or she was a good surgeon, but she's dead now because she did volume. Forget it. Get paid out of network. Ira's poking my bear. You got it. We need to find a compromise, Dan, and I agree with you. And we have to start saying, he poked me, that there is efficiency. That's true. And if you want a lifestyle because you want to play pickleball at 12, bless your soul. Me, I want to live in the operating room till 5 o'clock and get paid. And if I can only do 3 cases, I'm happy, but I want to be paid for it. And so we have to fight the fight. I don't have an answer, but I love efficiency for the others. Most surgeons are efficient, so it's a team effort to get together. And I think Dr. DeCook really describes that in his team in Ospitec, and I'm not part of their team. But I think you're right. We have to be careful. It's a fine line. Sorry, Ira.
No. I poked this purposely.
Charlie doesn't usually need to be defended, but I'll help defend him here. He's trying to, he wants to play pickleball at noon and all that type of deal, but
good.
He's right, and he's getting through his cases and trying to clear out the next room for his other surgeons and partners. The good thing about all that, and the good thing about efficiency relative to the things that surgeons don't control, is that there's no reason, even if we want to take longer in the operating room, we want to train our residents for longer, we want to do everything we can do. We can get done earlier in the day, but our cases can still take the same length of time, Kevin. And I agree with you. I don't want to repeat going from $2,500 per cataract to $65 per cataract because we're saying we can do 30 cases in a day. But it is nice to be done, clear out the space, and let another surgeon who wants to do his next 3 cases in the afternoon when you're done with your 3 by the morning. And as long as our cases are taking an hour, 15 minutes, we're not going to see it. We should not be seeing a big change in our reimbursement. But I do like the idea of being more efficient, like Sarah said, outside and with the things that are outside of the surgeon's control.
That's good.
That's one thing you can do to defend Charlie.
I think Brian, no, Charlie's leading the pack, and I'm really happy, but I think we have to learn how to say no when they lower the reimbursement, and that's a problem these days because most younger surgeons are paid by hospitals. So they don't even know what they're being paid. So, and Ira runs a department, so he can help us in this. I don't have answers. I just say beware. The ophthalmologist went through this 25, 30 years ago.
Yes.
I'm going to just make a quick comment, Brian. This has come up a number of times, and I think, Brian, you brought up the great point. Efficiencies out of the OR versus Medicare cherry picking people like Charlie and saying, well, since he could do it that way, we're going to lower the RVU. And that may not be the average surgeon. And that is problematic. But efficiencies out of the OR, like efficiencies in PAT, pre-admission testing, efficiencies in optimization of patients, nutritional optimization, which is another Joey topic club coming up pretty soon. Out of the OR shouldn't change any aspect of the RVU.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's 100% right, Ira. And the other thing about Kevin making money is, you have to become partners with everybody so that you're actually controlling the dollar. And that's what we did when we set up the IPA in Buffalo. Get all the joint surgeons together, start making, our care plans, what we're going to do perioperatively, certainly in the post-op, from skilled nursing facilities, and how everything really has changed post-COVID anyways, relative to people not being operated in the hospital or no one staying in the hospital anymore. So there's so many things that we can actually work on that change the healthcare spend. I mean, we're in charge of $180 million worth of spend, but the surgeon is only getting, a fifth of all that money or a sixth of all that money, which is still better than what we did in 2017. But because we have decreased the overall spend, the insurance companies in our region, are willing to help pay. And I believe 100%, and this goes back to the same thing with RVU changes that Dan brought up. The ACO models that came out back in 2015, they were a race to the bottom. So whatever anybody is doing, you need to make sure that you are, forecasting your trends over the next 5 years or more with joint replacements to determine what your target number will be and what you're willing to do to deliver the care to your patients, for an equitable dollar. But you need to be at the table, otherwise you're dinner.
I think that's a great point. Moby, you want to comment to being at the table on this stuff? Because you're in an area that needs orthopedic surgeons.
We need much fewer. So New Hampshire and Vermont, per capita orthopedic surgeons per 100,000 are in the top 5 in the United States. And it's because Boston has, 8 training facilities, and everybody who trains in New England wants to stay in New England, and Massachusetts is too expensive, so they all come north. Population of New Hampshire is 1.4 million. Population of Vermont's 900,000. So there's too many of us competing for a finite number of patients. Wow. I mean, I think Brian's point is good in several respects. Number one, you've got to bring data to the table. So if you can prove, I don't know that, I mean, this may be true for Medicare if you look at the bundled payment things, but when you're talking about private insurance companies or self-insured companies, you have to be able to prove that you are, providing value, that you have a low complication rate, low readmission rate. They're not so much interested in how the patients do. They're interested in the things that cost money to them, readmissions, reoperations, infections, things of that nature. And if you can show them data, you can work with insurance companies. We all like to think of them as supremely evil. But, there are ways to work with them. The other thing I would say is healthcare is regional. In other words, it's different, in different parts of the world. Ours is heavily controlled by Mass General, who owns a lot of hospitals, owns a lot of doctors. They're trying to build their own insurance product within their network. They're heavily in bed with United Healthcare, Medicare Advantage, and things like that. And so there are these political forces at play that you kind of need to be aware of when when you're trying to sort out how the game works in your particular area. And so something that works in New England might not work in Texas, might not work in Florida, and then there's all these other models out there, MSOs that people are forming, IPAs and things of that nature. And so it's a really fascinating field. I think that it's an evolving field. I think it's one where you need, as a surgeon, to understand how the system works, and that requires,
Hey, do you need
I've learned a
anything?
lot of this stuff through LinkedIn, just through networking with people and talking to people across the industry. We've been successful in setting up some bundled payments with commercial insurance companies, which has been very good for us. And all that takes time, work, and understanding. And so you do have to be at the table, and you have to be informed, and you have to provide data.
Yeah, I think I will comment briefly on this. I gave a lecture at a conference in Tampa recently on how an orthopedic joint replacement surgeon makes money for a hospital. And I took over 3,000 Part A collections of a single hospital and analyzed them, and analyzed what I call an equation: revenue minus the checks you write due to surgeon behavior gives the hospital working capital. R minus C equal W. And what that means to me is that my current joint fellow, I said to him, in your contract, you should write in there that you should have access to the Part A collection data. He's working for a hospital in West Virginia, and you should have access to all that data, because the more data you know, the more you're able to help. Forget about negotiating, which is always so important, but you can really help the system when you know that if the average reimbursement happens to be $26,000 for a joint replacement, okay, and you have decided to use 7 different add-ons that add $3,000 to the case, then the working capital back to the hospital is less. All right. So you need to know your Part A collection, which is so important. Otherwise, I think you're in the dark. And then these technologies like the Turbett, getting back to the pods and others, really allow you to do that extra case a day, I would think. And I don't know if that's been your experience, to do the extra case a day, because that's the ball game. With all due respect to the pickleball players in the world, I'd rather do an extra case a day than an extra set of pickleball. And maybe, just saying, just throwing that out. Some comments on that, Brian?
Yeah, I like my partners to do that extra case. I want to go sailing, boating, or
Well,
skiing.
it's his end.
But by getting it done, by not wasting your time, because that's the biggest waste, right? You're sitting around doing absolutely nothing, and then everybody gets in the habit of doing nothing. So it's not just you; it then becomes the anesthesiologist, because they know the room's not going to be ready for a while. Then they got to go find the anesthesiologist, then they got to go find the nurse. So being efficient helps all the people just keep going forward. Who do you want to give the next task to? The person who's doing all of them, because they're going to get it done. And if people are just sitting around, it's inertia, right? It's hard to overcome inertia with somebody sitting in a chair, but if they're moving, you can get things done. So I like the efficiency side. I liked it when Rob brought it to me in 2013. I thought, this is a great idea. It's something really going to help, in our operating rooms. And it has. It's been tremendous for our hospital and tremendous for the IPA. 20 guys, now we have 3 women and 17 men doing joint replacements in Western New York, all over 200 cases a person. Some are actually doing sports and others, but I have partners doing 800-900 cases a year. I don't want to do that. I have no intention of doing that, but I want to make sure I get out of his way, because Shri will knock me down walking through the hallway if I don't get done in time. So it's super helpful. The people, and the nice thing, and Kevin, you're talking about, you gotta know your people and all that stuff. Everybody should go down to SPD, because nobody appreciates SPD, Sarah, until you go down and see all the things that those nice people down there are working so hard to do. It is easy to point your finger at SPD, but it's hard to point your finger and say something bad about Sarah. right? Go down, visit the people, understand the process, and you'll be better for it. Then you'll make those people part of your team, which is they always have been. They just don't feel like it.
So I'm
Yeah, I
gonna,
can agree.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Say that. I, I'm gonna say, like most topic sessions, we get to the hour much faster. Time seems to go faster during the Joey topic session than anything else. So I'd like the panelists to give us takeaways now, just a minute or two, and maybe someone, especially Sarah, we'll start with you, talk about staff morale related to the turbot, if that's been a positive issue. So I'll start with you, Sarah, to sort of make some final summary statements, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in reference to Turbot and the organization that I work for, bringing that on board, I will tell you that 100% boosted morale in my department. I got to tell you, as stated before by Brian, like SPD is probably one of the most overlooked positions within a healthcare organization, especially when it comes to surgery. And when you give these individuals something that can make their lives 10 times easier, it's just phenomenal. Um, I don't regret buying my 20 pods at all. If I have the opportunity, I may purchase more. So I it really it helped me out because they're not being beat up every day by lifting total pans 100 times over, because those things can get pretty heavy sometimes. And, it's made patient safety a big increase in the organization also, because that's our number one concern in SPD. So,
All right. Moby, some comments? Oh, wait, someone had something to say? No? Okay, Moby, some comments? Just some final
I
comments?
agree with a lot of what's been said. I like what Brian said, that we can't do what we do without a big team of people behind us. We often don't acknowledge the extremely hard and critical work that SPD does so that we can just show up and get our case done. And there's a lot of moving parts behind the scene that we take for granted and just walk in and expect everything to be ready to go. And I think that anything that can be done, to improve the efficiency and the, the quality of life and the safety for those that are doing that critical work that allows us as surgeons to take care of patients efficiently is worth more than just money in terms of the value. And so I think if you have, pencil pushers that are trying to sort of measure cost savings, I would say that the real value in this, I think that it's the efficiency of getting things done faster, better, and safer. But it's also, I just think that, on the SPD side and the scrub tech side, the nursing side, just making that day flow better so that you can get a lot done and people can finish early and not sort of suffer through the day is just invaluable. You can't put a dollar sign on that, and it's worth a lot.
Yeah. Andrew, I think we lost you to the internet, possibly. Yes. So Brian, you're going to bring us home.
Okay, well, SPD does a great job, and they deserve a lot of credit getting everything done. This definitely helps in our department, and all across the city with our SPD people. It also helps morale in the operating room with the nurses, because the nurses are allowed to go back to their job of taking care of patients and not unwrapping Christmas presents all day long and looking for tiny holes in the Christmas wrapping paper and not allowed. And then the patient comes in and then they got to scramble around and do things. So the nurses actually in the operating room really like this as well. At least that's been my experience. And then the last thing, we talked about efficiency. We talked about Charlie and how many cases you get done in a day. But the thing that everybody's talking about is actually owning the numbers, owning the data. So if you go and visit Charlie, which I recommend people do, it's a great experience. I did that. You realize that there's a lot of cost associated with getting all those cases done. They have 7 people turning over the room that they're coming out of. every time. That's a lot of staff with a lot of cost. So it's okay if you're going to do a lot of cases, and it's okay if Medicare looks at the whole, enterprise and says, we really haven't diminished the cost of getting any one of those cases done. We still have to reimburse for getting those cases done and getting it done appropriately. But you need to look at the full dollar value of that. So, for me, I mean, I've been involved with pods for 7 years. It's been great. Sarah, I think, is kicking my butt. She's got more pods than I have. Our closest hospital, I think, in Western New York has 18. You're still winning there. And I think there's only 22 people in your town. So I'm super impressed.
You're close.
Well, this has been a phenomenal session. I want to thank Rob Turbett and Turbett for being an advertiser and a loyal Joey sponsor. This session was great because of the faculty, the panel, and the participants this has been maybe the busiest chat room that we have had in our history. And we've had 2 years of history of doing these. This is like our 60th one of these. I want to thank everyone sincerely for the time and their effort in taking some time on a Wednesday night, whether you're in Cabo or whether you're in Sioux Falls. I really appreciate it. If you're in New England with all the other orthopedic surgeons on your block, that works out equally as well. So thanks, everybody, and I'm going to say good night.